So we're going to be asking some big questions. In fact, there's some note that Jesus asks so many questions because it helps us understand who he is and what our purpose and our mission is as well. But we're going to go back to the basics. This is sort of fundamental 101 about who is Jesus and why do people need Jesus. I want you to watch this video.
Who was Jesus?
Who is Jesus?
That's the question.
That's the question.
Was he a real person?
What did he say?
What did he do?
What made him so special?
What made him different than any other man in history?
The records show
His birth was a miracle.
his mom was a virgin and she was pregnant.
He made the blind see.
The deaf hear.
The mute speak.
The paralyzed walk.
He healed terrible diseases.
He knew what was in men's minds.
He knew what was in men's hearts.
He knows what is in men's hearts.
He knew the story of people's lives without ever having met them.
He spoke with authority.
He amazed teachers.
He amazed everyone. Nature obeyed
He
him.
turned water into wine.
He walked on water.
He walked on top of the water.
He could change the weather.
He fed 5,000 people from one lunchbox.
He brought people who were dead back to life.
He loved sinners.
He loved everyone.
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 He forgave sins.
He never made a mistake.
He never once sinned.
But we judged him.
We whipped and beat him.
We spit on him.
And we killed him.
He loved us anyway.
He loves us anyway.
He died for us.
He died so that we wouldn't have to.
He paid for our sins with his life.
Did I mention he loves us?
He came back to life.
He was dead.
Then he was alive.
A lot of people saw him.
He is coming back.
Who is Jesus?
That's a big question.
That's the big question.
What does it even matter?
What does it matter to you?
Who is Jesus?
My answer doesn't matter to you.
Only your answer matters to you.
Who do you say that he is?
Who do you say that he is?
How could we not just go to prayer? Let's do so. God, let the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. So if you go to Halifax, Nova Scotia, about 35 or 30 miles outside of Halifax, there's a little town, and you could stand on the corner of this street and that street, literally. The name is this street and that street, which the tourists are always confused. The locals love to tell you, well, you go down this street, and about a half a block you turn down that street, which is really confusing. Part of what we do in the church is to give direction, clarity, to point to something that will give us a sense of where we're going, what we're doing, why we do what we do, what our purpose is, what our mission is. And there is no greater North Star than Jesus himself. We turn to God, to the scriptures, but Jesus embodies the direction, the clarity of who we are, where we're going, and what we are to do. And we trust that the guidance that we see and the way in which he lived and loved and who he loved will give us some guidance in our life to be able to give a direction to us. So one of the problems is that being part of something for so long, you tend to almost forget what you're doing and why you do it. I've been a part of a lot of organizations, a couple of companies too, that really just spend a lot of time hashing out a mission statement. You ever done this before? You work for months and months on a mission statement, and you put it up on a wall, and 3 weeks later, it's invisible. Nobody sees it. Nobody follows it. You just did a lot of work for not a lot of reasons. So part of it is to understand who we are. The longer we do something, the less we think about why we're actually doing it. We're in this odd phase in American history where there's even some debate about who's an American, who's a real American. I mean, we used to, I think, at least in an imperfect way, had some sense of common understanding of what it means to be an American citizen. That seems no longer to be the case. There are people now that says you're not an American citizen unless you believe this, this, and this. We have these dividing lines. It happens in religion. That at some point, as imperfect as religion is, we had some sense of commonality. We shared a story. We understood on some level our primary purpose and our mission to this world. And now you begin to see these divisions. And the questions become, well, are you even a real Christian if you don't do this or believe this? Somewhere along the line, we just stopped asking the fundamental questions. We just assumed there are a lot of people here, and it's not an indictment. You just grew up in a church. You never actually thought much about why you believe what you believe. You just assumed that your parents believed it, you believe it, and now that's part of the culture that you're a part of and that you live into fully. So what we're going to do in these next several weeks is just go back. Stop, ask the questions that we stopped asking a long time ago. Go back to the root of the issue to gain clarity about who we are by asking the questions that need to be asked. So we're going to look at 3 questions in the next several weeks, and then we're going to follow it up with some big questions that Jesus asks us, which I think is fascinating. So the 3 fundamental questions are really rudimentary, which means, why do people need Jesus? Second question is, why do people need the church in general? The last one is, why do people need this church in particular? There's a great passage from Peter, 3rd chapter. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you, to give the reason for the hope that you have. Isn't that a great passage? Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you, to give the reason for the hope that you have, meaning be ready, have some sense. If somebody stopped you and asked you, why do you do what you do? Why do you believe what you believe? What feeds your soul? What motivates you? What's your burning passion that you feel in your life, in the roles that you play? And a lot of us have figured out from very smart people that why is the most important question. So often we understand the questions lead to clarity, and when you look at the Gospels themselves, I think it's fascinating to realize that Jesus asks 307 questions. People ask of him 183 questions, which means he's asking more questions of people than people are asking of him. We now converted religion to Jesus is the answer. He's going to give you the simple answer, and he is the answer to some degree, but he wants you to get to the point where you find the answer, so he's going to ask the questions, and he asks more questions than we ask of him. And just a side note, people ask 183 questions of Jesus. Do you know how many answers directly? There's only 3 questions he answers directly, which is maddening. I mean, people ask him a question expecting a direct answer, and out of 183, there's only 3 people who get a direct answer. What Jesus is saying is, let me reframe this because you're not even asking the right question. Somebody comes and says, Jesus, tell my brother to give my share of the inheritance. And Jesus doesn't answer the question. He actually reframes and talks about the importance of the relationship between the brothers. And people would ask him questions, and instead of just answering directly, he would tell a story or a parable because he wanted to tell people, you're not even asking the right questions. And if you ask the right questions, inevitably they lead to the right answers. But if you spend all your time asking the wrong questions, you're going to find the wrong answers. And if you think in this world we live in, things don't really change, that we keep repeating the same cycles of violence and poverty and hatred, and things just never seem to change, part of the problem is we haven't figured out what the right questions to ask. You know, part of us just generally start, and I'm guilty of it too, you are as well, I'm sure. We start with what questions? Well, what do you do for a living? What are you going to do after graduation? What are you going to do after you retire? What kinds of things does your company sell and produce? What kind of services do they offer? How about the programs? What kind of programs do you have in your church? And we ask these what questions, which are informational, transactional, but they're really not the fundamental questions that ought to be asked. I love the quote with Albert Einstein, who, given his intelligence, bears repeating. I once thought, he says, if I could ask God just one question, I would ask how the universe began. because once I knew that, all the rest is simply equations. But as I got older, I became less concerned with how the universe began. Rather, I'd want to know why he started the universe. For once I knew that answer, then I would know the purpose of my own life. It's the why question. Sometimes we look at Genesis and we sort of pick it apart. We try to find factual ways to justify creation. 7 days, really? It never seeks to set out to say, here's how the world was created in terms of what we might understand. The real idea of Genesis is to help us understand why God created the world, more importantly, why God created us and what we're to do. So think back when you were a child, always asking your parents why. Why is the sky blue? Why is the grass green? Why do fish breathe underwater? And then something happens to us. I think as we get older, we just stop asking questions. We stop learning and stop growing. If you're a parent here, I've got bad news for you, or good news. You already know this. Studies show that a 4-year-old asks on an average about 200 questions per day. Between the ages of 2 and 5, 40,000 questions. Everything is out in front. Some of your parents are nodding your head. You know this. And some of you that are just now parents are about to experience this. They're always wondering, always asking questions, looking for it. So the idea that the kids ask questions, I think the hard part to understand is that goes down, declines exponentially. That the older they get, the less questions. Maybe it's the school system that says we're not as interested in your questions as we are of helping you reproduce the answers. And getting to the answers we see are the most important answers. And so it begins to tamp down and dampen the creativity or the questions or inquisitiveness of a child who always wants to know and always wants to grow. And so by middle school, kids pretty much stop asking questions. By the time they get to be teenagers, they just stop talking to everybody, okay? So the right questions lead to the right answers. And knowing what questions to ask are the most important. I find this fascinating. 1894, the world's in conflict. And somebody is smart enough to pose a question. And here's what the question is. Might it be possible to reduce international warfare by having countries compete on a playing field instead of a battlefield? From that one question came the modern day Olympics. Meaning, let's stop fighting on a battlefield. Let's compete with one another. Let's do it in a way that brings people together and gives a sense of commonality and purpose to that as well. So the why question is everything. And some of you who are more averse to that know this. The why question says everything. Why do you do what you do? What stirs your soul? What feeds your passion? What really gets you up in the morning? What do you do? Why is it so important for you to work so hard, to believe so deeply, to fight so hard for the things that you believe in? And we ask these wrong questions. Sometimes we just ask the questions like, well, do you believe in Jesus? Great question. The better question is, do you love Jesus? And do you need Jesus? Because I think there's a legitimate question. Do people need Jesus? There's a lot of people who would say, I'm self-sufficient. There's some ups and downs in my life, but I think I'm a good person. I'm generous. I mean, how do you talk to somebody who says, for the most part, I think I have everything I need? The idea that you think I need Jesus doesn't make sense in my life, and we have to acknowledge there's a whole group of people out there that would say that, is that I'm self-sufficient. The goal of life is to be independent. I'm a good person. I don't need anybody. I am on my own, and I don't need God nor Jesus. So why do people need Jesus? Standard answers, I hope you already know. He's the Son of God, resurrected from the dead. If you want to know who God is, you look at Jesus, because Jesus embodies everything about God. The love, the grace, the way in which he served people. Everything about his nature points you to the character and nature of God himself. Why do we need Jesus? Because this world needs love and compassion, and that's what Jesus is, and that's what he does. Love your neighbor as yourself. Service to others, forgiveness that gives people a sense of a second chance and hope. To find our life when we lose it, the best thing to do is to give it away in love and service to others. Just think about all the things why we need to feed the poor, to heal the sick, to tend to the brokenhearted, to free those who are captives and imprisoned by their own past and by the shame and all the mistakes they've made in their life as well, to hold us accountable, to tell us the honest, hard truth. And when we lose our way, to take us by the hand and lead us back home and remind us of who we were supposed to be and created to be. Why do we need Jesus? To find strength in our daily life, to find the peace that escapes us in this world. I need Jesus for all these things because without him, I will always be lost to some degree. I'll never live into my God-given potential as a child of God without him. So Jesus begins to ask these questions. Remember, 307 of them, one of the most important. He's asking his own disciples, so who do you say that I am, or who do people say that I am? He prefaces it, well, what's everybody saying? And that's an easy one because we can just regurgitate what we've heard. Well, some people say you're John the Baptist or Elijah come back from the dead, and that's an easy thing. I'm just going to tell you what I've heard from other people. That's my version of the question and the answer that you're looking for. And then Jesus turns it on a dime, and this is where it's important, it's where it gets personal. But who do you say that I am? Not what other people think, but who do you say that I am? Because it makes it personal. It makes you not hide behind whatever somebody has written or said or what you just agree with. But in your own experience in your life, who do you say that I am? I'm not making this up. This past week, I played golf with a good friend of mine. He was telling me about his son. And his son graduated from college, got a really good job, got married, have a child. And he said one day in this quiet conversation, his son looked at him and he said, "Dad, is this all there is?" And the father just sort of took him back for a little bit. What do you mean? Is this really kind of all there is? And we talked about that conversation. Because some of the most successful people in the world will tell you they've worked hard all their lives, they've climbed the ladder, they've achieved success, they've made a ton of money, they did all the right things, everything the world told them they needed to do to be successful, they have everything, and then you'll talk to them and there's a lot of folks who feel like, am I really just missing something? I remember having somebody come to me in ministry one time and we were just talking, and this person really had an incredible career. And he said, to me, I wish I could do what you do. And I thought, you have no idea what I do. You wouldn't want to do this. I mean, I'd love to do what you do. I mean, you've got a successful bit, but I understand what he's saying is, my job is enough, but it doesn't feed my soul. It puts food on the table, it gives a roof over the head, it gives me a sense of prominence, success, but it doesn't feed the emptiness inside of me to the degree that I hoped and wanted to do. So why do people need Jesus? Here's my take on it for what it's worth. I think people need Jesus because strangely, Jesus needs us, and every one of us longs to be needed, to know that our lives are more than what we just see on the surface, that there's something else to this. William Willimon, former bishop, now retired, but used to be the chaplain at Duke University. We got Duke University here also. He said that they had a career day at Duke University. You know, if you've been to college, you know how this is. All the Fortune 500 companies, all the top companies come, and they have people who are recruiters to recruit the brightest and the best students, Duke University being one of the better universities. And they all had it, and they had about 2 minutes to sort of introduce themselves and give some direction about where they were going to be, what they were going to do. And all the Fortune 500 companies came, made their presentations, and promised promising careers and six-figure salaries and all kind of benefits, but work that they were being trained to do, educated to do, and it was an opportunity for them. Toward the last, there was one person who represented a nonprofit group called Teach America. And Teach America was a nonprofit group, and he just got up there and he said, look, I'm not going to waste your time. All of you are probably here. You're going to go on to successful careers. You're going to make a ton of money. But if you're interested, and maybe just a handful of you that are interested, we got some brochures over here, and Teach America is really an endeavor to go into neighborhoods that are impoverished, where kids don't really have a chance, that nobody really tells them they're going to amount to anything. They don't have any sense of vision or dream or possibilities, and what we do is just go into it and we try to change their lives, try to give them a better future. We try to tell them that they're valuable and that they're honored. And so he just sort of ended and said, we've got some brochures. I'll be at that table over there. When they finished and they invited people to go to the tables, about a third of the people there, the students, all Duke coming graduates, third of them head over to Teach America because something about it resonates with them. Something about it said, I just don't want to live my life with just making a lot of money, being successful, and hoping that fills the void in my life. So why do people need Jesus? Because Jesus needs us, and all of us long to be needed, to know that our lives matter, that we have a purpose and a meaning. So when you ask this question, why do people need Jesus? Don't answer for them, answer for yourself. Why do I need Jesus? When you look back over the course of your life, you have to say, this is my answer to the question. I can't grab it from a book. I can't copy and paste it off the internet. I can't listen to a preacher. I've got to answer this question for myself. Why do people need Jesus? Meaning, why do I need Jesus? Because you'll have your own answer. And at some point, all the stories that you read in the gospel will intersect with your life. There's going to be a time when your eyes are going to be open and you realize how blind you were to the truth. There's a time when you're going to find forgiveness, when you couldn't even forgive yourself. And you're going to find yourself in the stories over and over again when you were as lost could be, and you didn't think there was any hope of ever coming back home, and you read the prodigal story, and then you realize, that's my story. And the Father's coming out to throw his arms around me to welcome me home even when I don't deserve it. And you're going to find over and over again your life in the midst of it, why you need Jesus, because Jesus resurrected your life, gave you courage that you didn't know you had, turned you around when you were lost, took you by the hand and led you back to where you should have been, forgave you in your worst moment, loved you in spite of yourself, ultimately loved you back to life. Why do people need Jesus? Because he knows the answer to the question that gnaws at each one of us. Is this all there really is? And the answer is no. There is so much more to life. There is so much more to you. And if you'll let me, I'll take you by the hand and I'll show you the abundance of life that awaits you.